Oh, I already see what it is. He thinks he's a gangster.
What's up, everybody? Excited to have you on Marky Marks and Fuego podcast. In this podcast, we're interviewing entrepreneur, multi-millionaire, public speaker, and performance coach, Sabastian Enges. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks, Mark. Happy to be here.
Awesome, man. Well, super pumped to have you. I appreciate you driving up from Orange County. You know, I got to know you literally my first time I met you was on Halloween. And so obviously our colleague Frank is like, hey, man, you got to get involved in this PPE business. But, you know, Frank's background is sales and marketing, your background is sales and marketing, performance coach. And I was just transitioning from the startup that I was at. We were in the process of selling to Bain Capital. It was a digital healthcare startup. And so I remember literally calling my mom and FaceTiming her like, hey, I'm just going to go down. Like, it doesn't hurt to have a conversation. And that's what I remember. And it was Halloween, and I can give two shits about going to Halloween parties or dressing up. I was just focused on, all right, what's the next thing and what can we do? So I drove down to Orange County and then met you and Frank and saw your office. And man, I was impressed. I think the first thing I remember was you had like this breakout and you gave this motivational speech to your sales team. And I was like, wow, this guy's got a lot of energy. Reminds me of me, which is great. And then we kind of hit it off. So, welcome to the show, the Marky Mark and Fuego podcast. For those listening on Clubhouse Live, it's a podcast where we're also filming it. So we're live in the Hollywood studio. It's all about entrepreneurs, entertainers, athletes, artists, people who are building something to make a difference in the lives of others. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and we're going to dive into, what made you, how did you become a multimillionaire, but more importantly, what you're about, what Sebastian's about.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm excited to be here. I think a little bit of background. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, so I am a diehard Seattle Seahawks fan and love Washington for a number of reasons, but I lived in California for the last 20 years. Came down here originally to work with a startup that was doing a round of funding and then didn't leave. And it's definitely a great place to be an entrepreneur for a number of reasons, although it's debatable in California from a business standpoint how great it is.
These days, yeah.
For sure. But I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. I was raised in a single family household, and that definitely changed my view of money, politics, kind of shaped my view of how to get ahead.
Yep.
And so I had to make some really early decisions on, good financial strategy, which directions I wanted to go in life, which I look back at now with a lot of gratitude, because although there was a lot of pain related to it, it really helped me kind of understand how to navigate life much earlier than most.
When you talk about pain, like let's dive into a little bit here. So did you have some struggles financially, or just seeing, growing up in a single family home, the financial struggles and kind of like just getting molded from that early on of an age?
Yeah, I mean, both. I think there's some early memories that come to mind, but my entire family's structures, everything was based on money, right? Everything they did was based on time or money.
Yep.
And so that was a frame of reference at a very young age. And we certainly weren't poor, like poverty level, but if there was anything I wanted, if I wanted, new clothes, if I wanted a car, if I wanted new hockey equipment, it was on me to come up with it. There was no way my mom was able to take care of me for that. But I think really early on, I actually really enjoy science and was very, very excited about science early on in life. And I was probably 9-10 years old, and I woke up in the middle of the night to my mom crying, and I walked downstairs and she was sitting at the kitchen table and she had all her bills out in front of her in her checkbook. She was trying to figure out how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to come through? So I sat down with her and started kind of helping her with her bills, and whoa, there's more month here than you have money. And it totally changed my world in a moment. And I decided money is the first thing to solve for. We deal with that, everything else comes. And so it changed how I looked at things from that point on. I still love science, but then my priority became business and politics.
That's incredible. So you were 9 years old when that happened?
9 or 10, yeah.
And you were able to look at the numbers and realize the balance sheet at 9 years old, essentially?
Yeah, I had to sit down with her and figure it out, but yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's like an epiphany, but we all have that. I can relate to that because growing up, at 9 years old, believe it or not, is when 8 years old, 9 years old, I would hear my mom going to my their bedroom, and then she would slam the door and just argue about money. And it just day after day and week after week. And for me, it's like, all right, I need to learn how to mow lawns. And that's what
Yep.
I did. And then by the time I was 11 and 12 years old, my twin brother and I went and knocked on doors, and we had like a Commodore 64 and we made flyers. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to worry about money. And so I think we were like mowing the lawns for like the whole neighborhood, 2 other neighborhoods, had friends working with us. So I can totally relate to that. So that's incredible. So early on, you start to get molded and you say money is the way to solve problems. What's your train of thought? Because there's people out there that say money doesn't buy happiness.
Right.
I think it's bullshit.
Right.
What's your thought on that?
I would have been that guy. I was raised in a Christian home.
Likewise.
And so there was that kind of frame growing up. And I always had a lot of questions about religion. I studied most of the major religions by the time I was 13, just trying to make sense of them and understand their truths. But I was told that my entire life. And I believed that for a long time. You would ask me like, well, money isn't everything. Although in the book of Ecclesiastes, Old Testament, right there at the very end, money is the answer for everything. And the reason is simple. And I'm not money driven at all. It's that money buys you options, right? So it solves problems. If you come down with a severe form of cancer or some disease, your best chance of surviving is having money because you can hire the best doctors. Or your relationships are screwed up. Well, your best chance of fixing them is having the best therapist. So it buys you the options to fix your problems. And so that's the way I look at it. I want to get to a point, and my goal is to teach people to get to a point where money's off the table. Money isn't the reason they're making decisions, so they can go about living their life. But if you live in a first world country and you're not considering money, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I love that. The other thing is like when they say money doesn't buy happiness, I disagree. And I like Dan Pena. Do you follow Dan Pena at all? He's hilarious. Dan Pena's quote is, anyone that says money doesn't buy happiness doesn't know where to fucking shop. Right? So like, let me give you an example of why it does buy happiness. And I don't think it's the end all be all either. And I grew up in a Christian household. My dad's a deacon in the Catholic Church, then was born again Christian, Pentecostal. I've seen it all going to the Southside Baptist Church of Chicago, right? But I get it. But here's why I could buy happiness. I was able to give away my car to the building manager who didn't have much from where I came before. And to see the look on his face and happiness, you know what? That bought me happiness because I don't need a car. And quite frankly, I'm not a good driver, so people are safer on the roads without me out there anyways, right? Like someone in your family that needs help and you can help solve problems for them and you get joy out of that. Well, money just bought you happiness, didn't it? So you're an entrepreneur. Take me through when you build your business, what's the first thing you think someone should think about when it comes to entrepreneurship? Because I think right now, especially in the millennial world, you have all these millennials like, I want to be an entrepreneur because it's cool. And I see all these entrepreneurs on Instagram or on TikTok that are driving Ferraris. And I think that's what's going to drive me to be happy. So I'm going to start a business to make money. What's your thought there?
I wouldn't start a business to make money.
Good.
First of all, money's a scorecard. I would start with something that you're good at and you'd be excited to do.
Yep.
And money is one of the scorecards. But it isn't, we're talking about money, and that was our frame starting out, but that isn't my main motivator behind my decisions.
Yes.
But I wanted to get to a point in life where money didn't have to be part of the decision. And to be fair, it's not totally off the table, but in my daily life, it's not something I have to consider.
Yeah.
But when I look at entrepreneurship in America today, it's a really interesting place we're at. When you have, kids on IG promoting their business and they're 19 years old. And part of me loves that, but they're offering services for things they've never done. They're not practitioners of real businesses, right?
Yep.
And information is really easy to get right now.
Absolutely.
Doing something with taking action on it still comes down to the individual.
That's right.
And so I would say I use a rule of 5 with entrepreneurs, the difference between an entrepreneur and an employee and whether or not you're fit for it. And it goes like this. And number 1, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you better be able to execute. I mean, you can't just have a plan. I say this all the time. If you have a plan with no execution, you're a wantrepreneur. You're not an entrepreneur.
That's right.
So number 1, you got to be able to execute. Number 2, you really do need to be passionate about what you're doing.
Yep.
You got to be passionate about your business and your craft. And so we could talk about passion in a second, as I have a mixed bag thought on that. But you do need to be excited about what you're doing. Number 3, you got to be a lifelong learner. And meaning that you're going after information yourself. You're not getting fed by someone else.
Yep.
Number 4, you got to be able to handle failure. And in our culture, that's a tough one, right? We haven't been taught to handle failure very well. And you go through school, K through 12, it's pass, fail. And you think you're either failure or you're a success. I can tell you, I have failed my way to success. Failure was the path to success. And
Absolutely.
So teaching people to be okay with failure is really important. You got to be able to respond well to it. And then you got to make good decisions and have a good decision matrix, as I call it, where your risk to reward ratios make sense. You know how to make the right bets.
Yep.
And that can be tough for people, but that's my rule of 5. If you think, yeah, I pass on all 5 of those, you might be cut out for entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I like that. At the end, it's prudence too. Like for me, I remember I was in corporate America. I started in sales, then I went to marketing to be a good steward and really learn it. And I sat down with the president of the company. It's Nuvasiv. At the time was like an $800 million company. And they just added a layer of management right in between where I was going to jump to. And I was pissed. And so he's from Schiller Park. I'm from Franklin Park, Illinois, blue collar town. So anytime you want to talk, cool, we're going to talk. I sit down with them. I said, listen, I respect you so much, but I want to let you know I'm pissed that you guys just put this layer of management in between us. I really don't see myself here. I'm an entrepreneur. He's like, well, son, let's talk. Sit right here. So I sat next to him. He puts his arm around me, throws up on the TV, YouTube, Guy Kawasaki.
Oh, yeah.
And Guy Kawasaki starts talking about the only reason to get into business is not to make money, because if you get into business to make money, you're probably going to fail. But if you get into business to make meaning or to solve a problem that's going to solve a wrong, that's where you're really going to succeed.
100%.
And you talked about passion. And, I know you want to dive into passion more. Talk a little bit about a passion when it comes to being an entrepreneur, when it comes to being even an employee at the same time. Like, how does that play into entrepreneurship and business in general?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm a big fan of Guy Kawasaki. Rules for Revolutionaries early in my life had a big impact. So we use passion a lot in our culture. It's thrown around a lot. Follow your passion, and the best lies are 60% truth. There is a lot of truth in that statement. The problem is let's be fair. Most people before the age of 25, maybe even 30, don't know what the fuck they're passionate about. Not even, and it keeps them paralyzed because they're trying to overthink it, right? Yeah. And so I found that passion shows up when you get good at something, right? Magically, right? There's very few people I've met that are naturally good at something or have worked hard to get good at something that also don't find a certain level of passion in it. Yep. And so I teach my guys constantly, no roots, no fruits. You put the work in and the passion will show up. And so, Mark Cuban get credit for saying it, but it's true. And I've said it a lot myself. Follow your effort, not your passion. Mm-hmm. Effort will get you to passion. Mm-hmm. And that's where a lot of people get stuck, because that takes commitment, that takes discipline, that takes follow through. And we're looking for the quick buck. You're going to get stuck. And so I put a lot more focus on effort on the front end, mm-hmm. and making sure that we're doing all the things the right way and building momentum, and magically passion shows up. And the easy, example of that is somebody who's working out or needs to work out. Doctor goes, hey, you got to get in the gym. You're not healthy. You got to lose 20 pounds. Well, I don't think anybody at that moment is too pumped to get in the gym. They don't typically have a lot of passion, right? Especially if you've never been in the gym or intimidated by the whole scene. Right. And so it gets worse from there, though, because now you go to the gym, you hire a trainer, and he's screaming in your face to do one more rep, and your body's screaming at you, stop, you aren't meant for this. You're probably anxious, you're depressed, you're angry. There's a whole suite of emotions that are going through while you're working out. Yep. If you're paying attention to those emotions, it would be easy to tell yourself, you know what? I'm just not passionate about this. Mm-hmm. This isn't for me. My body's telling me. I'm just listening to my heart. I love that phrase. I'm just listening to my heart. No, you're not. You're listening to your emotions. They're not the same thing. So basically you're saying to start putting in effort, and that's where you're going to really find what you're passionate about. So maybe trying different things, and if you don't know what you want to do, right? Stick with something. Okay. So staying with my workout analogy, day one, you get in the gym, yep. You're going backwards, not forwards, right? You're going to get the end of the day and you're not going to look any different. You aren't going to feel any different. In fact, you may feel worse. Then you wake up the next morning and you're sore. Now moving is hard, right? Yep. And so you're not feeling good yet. A week later, if you're committed to the process, you probably still don't look any different, but you're building a little bit more confidence because you're building a little routine. 3 weeks later, you look in the mirror and there's a line where there used to not be one, right? 4 weeks, 5 weeks later, now you're starting to feel good. Now you're researching supplements, new workout routines. You're maybe looking at your clothes. How can I maximize on this? You're looking at your schedule. You're getting more nerdy with it. Well, why? Yep. You didn't start there, but now you're starting to see a little bit of gain. You're starting to build some momentum. So now the passion shows up. So my advice is stick with something long enough to see whether or not it's really for you. Got it. Failure is part of the process. How do you deal with failure? Because life just, comes in different angles and you get kicked in the teeth, especially in business. How do you do it? Yeah. As I tell my sons all the time, it's okay to lose. Don't lose the lesson. I'm okay with failure. And I teach my guys this. I don't care if they fail. Fail early, fail often is the Silicon Valley quote, which I half believe. But there is some truth to just, it's okay to fail, learn from it. Like that's the key. And if you're not making the same mistakes over and over again, you will progress through it.
I love that. Can you say the saying one more time that you taught your sons?
It's okay to lose, just don't lose the lesson.
I think from that perspective, that just makes a lot of sense. I absolutely love that. So let's talk about entrepreneurship. How did you get started in entrepreneurship? What was your first venture? And then how did you get to where you're at today?
Yeah, my first venture was I was 11. And I actually, going back to, single family household, being the oldest male in my family, I tried to get a job and applied a bunch of places and nobody would hire me. And I was pretty frustrated. I'm like, hey, I have two able hands. I can work.
Yep.
Little did I know there's child labor laws that keep us from hiring 11-year-olds, which I'm quite happy about now. I have an 11-year-old son. So I'm thinking, that's probably pretty good. But you can own your own business. And somebody at church actually handed me a book that I still have on my desk, which is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
I love that.
And I read it and it changed my whole perspective. And there's a lot of things he talks about there, but one of the things is being resourceful.
Yep.
Right? And so growing up in the Pacific Northwest, anybody who's up in that area, June to August, blackberries grow everywhere and they grow wild. And so 11-year-old kid, I hire all my friends and we pick blackberries all summer. And I cold called all the local restaurants and I sold the blackberries to local restaurants for like $1 under what they were paying a gallon.
When you cold called, did you do it on the phone or door to door?
No, both. But a lot of it was on the phone because nobody was going to take, in my thought, nobody was going to take an 11-year-old kid seriously.
So you did.
So
all right.
I do it over the phone so they wouldn't realize I was 11. I don't know how many times I'd go deliver the berries and the owner of the restaurant would say, tell Mr. Enges hi for us. And I'm like, I'm talking to myself like, I'm Mr. Enges, motherfucker. What are you talking about? But I just quietly, I will, I take off.
Yeah, I love it. So you're selling blueberries. I mean, Mark Cuban was selling like garbage bags or something that at that age. That's amazing. So you transition, like, you're going through high school and then talk a little bit about your career path.
Yeah, so in school, I was always working on some business or another, had a lot of early success. And really going back to the BlackBerry business, there was a key lesson I learned there. And over a period of 8 weeks, I had made more money than my mom did in the same period of time. And she worked for an entrepreneur. And he took care of us. He was a great guy, took care of our family. But I started having questions like, okay, no matter how hard she works, she's making the same amount of money. The harder I worked, the more money I made.
Yep.
But why would anybody choose to be in a position where their money isn't tied to their result?
Wow.
Now, I grew up in a military family. I grew up playing sports. So this made sense to me on a number of levels anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that convinced me. I'm like, I don't want to go work for somebody else for a paycheck. And at this point in my life, I don't know how much somebody would have to pay me before I'd be cool with a paycheck. I want to be paid on my performance, which part of being an entrepreneur, you better be okay with that.
So did you go to college? Tell me about that.
I did. I went in Washington. You can test into college while you're still in high school. They have a program called Running Start. And so I was able to finish my first 2 years of college and graduate with my high school diploma. And then I went over to the University of Washington, was thinking about going to school there. And I was actually getting pitched on an international business degree that sounded really fun and exciting. And the woman that was pitching it to me was explaining quite casually how, I'd be about 3 years behind the real world coming out with my degree. And I think at the time it was like a $50,000 or $60,000 program.
It's crazy.
So I immediately corrected her and I go, you mean ahead, right? Like I'll be 3 years ahead?
Right.
And she kind of chuckles to herself and she's like, no, that's actually really good. Depending on the program, you could be 5 to 8 years behind. And I thought to myself, why the hell would anybody pay to be that far behind the real world? Now, not all degrees are that way. Some degrees you don't have huge turnover in information.
Yeah.
But that didn't make sense to me. And at the same time, I got a job working downtown Seattle and I was recruiting for Amazon. And so I was dealing with Amazon recruiters all the time. And they were telling me at the time, based on what they were hiring for, they would take somebody with real world experience over a degree all day long. And I started thinking to myself, do people know this? Right? It was frustrating to me. Like, what are you talking about?
I wish I knew that person or that person talked to me. So can you tell me what year that was about?
Yeah, that was 2001.
2001.
Yeah, okay. So we just come out of the dot-com bubble. It just burst.
Yeah.
We were coming into or breaking through a recession. So it was an interesting time.
Man, so for me growing up, I grew up blue collar, Chicago neighborhood, just by O'Hare Airport. And for me, my conception was I need to go to an Ivy League school so I can get out of what the social class that I'm in. So that way I'm going to get a good job and that's going to determine my success. Man, was I wrong. But I didn't really learn it until after college, so you're getting this lesson early on.
I think as far as Ivy League goes, the upside to an Ivy League school would be the connection and the
networking. Yeah.
Right. That would be the reason to go. And in all degrees of Like if I'm going to have surgery, I want to go to somebody who's got a degree, right?
Yep.
If I want an accountant or a lawyer. So I'm not saying that degrees don't matter, but for the general population, you may want to assess what you're doing before you invest in that. And we know that, right? We have a whole generation who's pissed off that there's $1 trillion worth of student debt,
Yep.
and it's not yielding the promise they thought it would. But I also don't blame corporate America, because kids aren't coming out of school well prepared for the real world
That's
either,
right.
because that's not the culture of college, right?
That's it.
And I talk to kids who, I coach 20-year-olds, and we talk about this all the time. Like, how much time did you actually spend in school? What was your favorite part of school? For most of them, it was partying and networking. It wasn't about learning.
There you go.
Right? They crashed for the test, they pass it, they move on, pass the test, move on. And so I tell them all the time, in the real world, nobody gives a fuck whether you can pass the test once. It's what you do daily.
There you
It's
go.
demonstrated
That's
competency, and we're not learning that in school as a whole. Now, I'm making sweeping generalizations, and there are exceptions to that, but I see it over and over again as most of the people I coach are in their 20s, and I'm having these conversations over and over again.
So take me through where you're at right now. You coach 20-year-olds. What else do you do with your business?
So I have a consulting firm. We're just about to celebrate our 10th anniversary, which I'm
Nice.
pretty stoked about.
Congrats.
Thank you. We started right after the last recession, the Great Recession, as it was called.
The great quick one.
Yeah, exactly. And it really was a lot of fun building the business. My heart is to train, mobilize, equip. I like seeing helping businesses run better, smoother, solve problems. And so consulting, coaching has just kind of always been a natural feel for me.
Yep.
And so coming out of the last recession, there was a highly unemployed group of college students that were looking for work. And so I decided to build what we call our business management training program.
Mm-hmm.
Where I bring them in. I'm not going to grade them based on their experience, their background, their degree. They're going to come in, they're going to be graded on the size of their heart, their ambition, their ability to work hard. And I'm going to teach them real world business skills that they can take with them. And so I teach all the time. The only real reason in my world to work for somebody is for an education,
Right.
not for a paycheck. And of course, somebody that just fresh out of school, that's somewhat disheartening to hear, right? Because like, what do you mean? I just got a degree.
Right.
Yeah, except for what you were taught was most likely theory. You weren't getting taught by practitioners, so you don't know what's real or what's not.
Correct.
If you want to learn something, go get advice from somebody who is where you want to be, that's really doing it. And so that's what in our business management training program, that's what we provide: a platform to grow and learn and develop entrepreneurs. We pay them, they have full benefits. So they get the upside of being an employee, but they also get the upside of being able to operate and think like an entrepreneur so that they can produce and grow their own businesses long term.
I love that. So there's a huge benefit there, because not only are they learning, but they're also getting paid. They're an employee and they're coming out of school. So you're doing a great service for those college graduates. Like Gary Vee talks about. Do you follow Gary Vee?
I love Gary Vee.
Yeah,
He's one of the few practitioners in social media that's actually doing what he's talking about.
Absolutely. And, obviously he talks about, hey, if you really want to get experience, do it for free. I would work for free. Can you imagine if you get experience from a multimillionaire who's teaching you, but you're also getting paid? I would also do it for free for someone else for whatever field I want to go into, because the experience is the value right there. I love that. Awesome. So tell me about like what's going on with your speaking business. I know you do a lot of public speaking, on top of coaching and training.
Yeah, this year has been obviously wild with COVID. Most of the speaking has been through Zoom, but I have a passion to help people. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what drives me. And my underlying value is freedom. So most of my message is around teaching people how to be free and mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. So I get, a lot of my speaking gigs are around that, teaching people how to think versus what to think. That's a big focus for me.
Okay.
We live in a culture and a world that is constantly forcing people to believe certain things, or like brainwashing them into what to think. Just pay attention to the media, and it's pretty laughable. I'm more interested in teaching people how to think so they can draw their own conclusions.
Yeah.
And to me, there's a much higher yield with that, because that's an independent person. A person who knows how to think on their own, then can functionally be independent. Only free people can help other people get free.
Yep.
Independence leads to interdependence. Now we change the world.
I love that. So who's your audience when you actually get the opportunity to public speak?
Mostly entrepreneurs, people in the entrepreneurial world, business owners, team leaders, things like that.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's awesome. You brought up how you want to think, and I literally just started taking a look at how is this world working with COVID. I never used to be in politics, and I started to actually think for myself.
Yeah.
And you've got the media who wants to control a narrative.
Yes.
And then you start thinking about, well, why is it called a program? Is there some incentive behind it? Right. And then is there something bigger? Like what are your thoughts on what's going on in the world today with COVID, with the media?
Yeah, I mean, I think now more than ever, it's important that we know how to think critically and ask good questions.
Yep.
The quality of the answer comes from the quality of our question. And so I have actually 2 reminders that go off on my phone every day.
Yep.
One of them is question anything that seems obvious and question anything that doesn't make sense. Those are 2 great places where you can become more self-aware and begin to understand the world around you. And so there certainly is a message and an agenda out there that is human nature. And it will take people taking the time to actually go out and research and do the information for themselves to figure out where the truth is. And the scary thing is the best lies are 60% truth or more, meaning the closer we get to the truth, the more believable the lie is. And so it's wild to me what passes as truth, what passes as news in today's world, and the things that people regurgitate and pass to each other without actually doing any real research to figure out whether it's even has any truth to it at all.
Yeah, that's good. So how has life changed for you outside of not being able to do public speaking for your business? Has it made your business better, more challenging? And what's it like? Because you're based in Orange County, but you're nationally, correct?
Correct. Yeah, we have 30 offices across the country. And so to be honest, and I recognize that I was somewhat fortunate to be in this position, but 2020 was a great year for me because it gave me a chance to pause and just kind of recalibrate and kind of restore myself. The 5 years prior to that, I was on the road every few weeks and gone a ton. And so being around my family, getting to spend time with my sons, just be home more was actually a blessing for me. We had a great year. Business did well, and we're looking like 2021 is going to be our best year yet.
Awesome.
And so, but we were able to pivot, and a lot of what we do, we can do remotely, thankfully. So it's been a great year for me, but it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Have you been able to pivot in other markets or anything different besides focusing on consulting?
Yeah, so still in the consulting space, but we moved into PPE this year, mostly because I had clients and friends who were getting screwed and really frustrated with just how PPE or personal protective equipment was being disseminated to the population, to frontline workers. And so I got into it really to try to solve a problem and lock down prices and help people get, hard to find items or hard to find material. And it's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it. And it's amateur hour out right now in the PPE space. So it's been fun to be able to get in.
Yeah, so PPE, for those listeners who don't know what that is, can you break it down in general? Obviously, we're going through COVID, but this was something that has been sold before COVID.
Yeah, it kind of became an industry here in the last 12 months. Before, it was more of an ancillary product that would go with medical supplies or cleaning supplies, janitorial supplies. But it's, really, it's all the equipment meant to keep us safe from COVID. And so you see it everywhere, whether we realize it or not. Most of us are wearing masks everywhere we go. That's PPE. Nitrile gloves are a big one that everybody's looking for right now. Face masks, face shields, gowns. Hospitals are in big need of PPE, but it's become an industry, and it's an emerging industry, and it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few years as COVID begins to kind of hopefully be tackled and in control. But I think as an industry, it's likely here to stay because COVID isn't the only thing out there that we're concerned about.
Yeah, so there's a lot of train of thoughts out there that think that this virus, obviously it started in China, someone bit a bat or whatever crazy idea happened, right? And so PPE, well, there was a shortage of supply to hospitals who frontline workers needed it. The ICU needed all these supplies, gowns, masks, gloves. So what are you doing to source it? Where are your opportunities to be able to move the product to get to your customers so you can lock pricing in? And why is it amateur hour? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, our goal is to get frontline workers the best possible price that we can. And what we're seeing, and it's in some parts of the industry, it's been controlled. Other parts, it's crazy right now. But huge gouging in the middle. So you have brokers who are coming in, they're trying to tie up large quantities of product, and then they're reselling it to the people who need it most for huge margin. And so our goal is to try to reduce that. We still need to make a profit. We still want to make sure we're taking care of our team, but our goal is to be able to place and find product for the guys who need it most at fair prices before it's been marked up 2, 3, 4 times or been flipped 2, 3, 4 times. And so amateur hour, there's a lot of people that pivoted out of energy. So a lot of guys that came from oil, I've noticed, are in the industry. A lot of guys in the real estate development biz have jumped in. And so they're all, it's an emerging market and everybody's trying to figure it out. But there's a lot of people in the middle it's an unregulated industry. And as a result, you really have to be smart with who you're doing business with and ask the right questions and make sure you're getting to the real decision makers.
Got it. So what can a buyer do to be a smart buyer?
Well, make sure you're dealing with a real seller or a seller's mandate,
Yep.
and generally do business with people who have a track record. Check out their references or find other people who have done deals with them. And then obviously, if you find someone that's great, own them, take care of them, build that relationship, because it's kind of like, if you have a good auto mechanic or a good doctor, when you find one, don't mess with it, right?
Yep.
That's because that's so hard to find. And once
Yep.
you find one you trust, it's great. So from the seller side, it's important that you find people you can trust and that are doing great work, that are procuring product, they're doing it themselves. You're not getting flipped product. Now, I get that there's a lot of desperation out there, so some people don't have that luxury. They're just trying to source and find product.
Sure.
But the closer you can get to the seller, the better.
That makes sense. So you built an empire. You have a lot of great things going for you. You kind of got a little bit into PPE. What's the future hold for Sabastian? What's the next move for you, or what are you looking for?
A bigger focus on education. I wanted to demonstrate being a practitioner first.
Yep.
If I'm going to teach people how to build businesses, how to mobilize and equip teams, I want to live it.
Yeah.
But I'm really calibrating going forward towards more focus on education and creating educational material and giving back.
Yep.
And different forms. And so that's something that'll be a bigger part of what I'm doing going forward. While I continue to build teams all over the world, that's a big goal of mine. I want to build a socioeconomic model that is sustainable, where there's a more balanced. We do business in a much more balanced way, where everybody's winning. And so take that model, and a lot of what I'm doing now in first world countries, like in the US, I want to take that model and bring it to third world countries to help bring economic success
Nice.
To areas that are deprived. And when you travel around the world, and I know you do,
Yep.
the first thing I notice when I look at areas where people are struggling, it's always a lack of education, a lack of know. When I talk to them and I have real conversations with them, they just don't know any better.
Got it.
Right. And so I think that is an aspect of having resources, having connections, but having knowledge. And I think the internet is changing that for so many people now. They have access to information. I think that's going to change the world. And we're seeing a more decentralized kind of flow of information. And we saw this, this week with Wall Street Bets and GameStop and the craziness there, right? When you decentralize information and you allow the little guy to play, it changes how things happen. So
That's
I'm sure there are
incredible.
people who aren't going to be very excited about that.
So really, if you want to stimulate economic growth, to me, what you're saying is it starts with education.
100%.
And getting them access to education. And obviously we can do that with media these days. I love that. You brought up GameStop. I know we're getting close on time, but what are your thoughts there? I mean, a lot going on. There's going to be a lot of angry hedge fund guys out there.
Yeah, I think it's wild. But if we're really about a free market, if we're really about laissez-faire, we're really about capitalism.
Yep.
Then I think we give them a voice and we let them step up. So I'm excited, and I'm excited to see what the future holds. But I'm a big fan of decentralizing power in all ways. And I think we're at a point in time where that's going to become the thing.
I think it was like around $175 the last time I looked, or something like that. Would you short the stock?
Not yet.
No?
Not yet. When people stop making a kind of a point about GameStop and they forget about it, that's the time to short it.
Do you know Ty Lopez?
I do.
Okay, so Ty Lopez and then his business partner, Dr. Mayer, Alex Mayer, great guys. Their business model is basically taking businesses like GameStop, but they have this name, this brand, Land's End, all these other ones that are brick
Radio
and mortar.
Shack.
Yeah, you got it, brick and mortar,
Yep.
and they're bringing it online. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the guy who wins this game is the guy who figures out how to marry brick and mortar with the virtual,
Yep.
where we have both. Right. And there was this huge pivot away from brick and mortar into the virtual world, and it's grown astronomically.
Sure.
But the guys who are going to win long term know how to marry those two.
Yep.
Strong brick and mortar presence, strong virtual presence. You see that Amazon's making that play right now. And they bought Whole Foods and looking at other retailers because they realize there is something lacking of everything is online. There is a middle ground. So I think it's smart. So if you're coming the other direction, you grab an undervalued retail asset that has a brick and mortar presence, and you marry it with a very strong virtual brand. I think that's a good place to be.
Love it. Love it. All right. So we've got maybe 10 minutes left. What we're going to do here is we're going to transition to questions. So we've got Clubhouse Live.
And what was your name? Jay Sean? Emmanuel. No, this is Manuel. Sorry. Manuel. Awesome.
What was his question? Sorry.
Early struggles that you overcame in building your own business.
Got it.
A lot of the early stuff is not knowing what you don't know, and getting kind of out of your way. It's just taking action. A lot of what you're going to learn because you just start taking action. And we see a lot of people early get paralyzed in fear, analysis paralysis. And so you're going to take hits. Expect that you're going to fail your way to success. But a lot of that's the inner work. And something I talk a lot about is closing the identity gap. The difference between who we think we are and who we really are, and really getting closer to who we really are, because that's where our power is. And so understanding that and understanding how to deal with you, mastering you, is the first step at conquering the world. So I think, that's the big stuff early on. And then a lot of it's just then really understanding how to take, tactically how to make good decisions.
And a lot of things that you were speaking of, I totally agree, because I've been an entrepreneur for a while myself, and learning from another individual that's had that success or have established that level of success that I'm looking to get to for my lifestyle, for my family, and for a legacy that I'm looking to leave behind. I think it's important to be able to gain that from someone that's willing to teach, and also willing to hold you accountable as well.
I love it. I love that you mentioned legacy. I think that's what it's about. We're here to make the world a better place. And if we do our job correctly, we leave the world to the next generation better than we found it.
All right, awesome. Well, guys, thanks for joining on live here. Definitely appreciate it. So, Sabastian, if someone wants to follow you and reach out to you, how can they find you?
I'm most active on Instagram currently.
Okay.
So we'll see about Clubhouse. Maybe we'll do that.
Yeah.
But currently most active on Instagram, which is at Sabastian Enges.
Thanks,
Awesome.
brother. Appreciate it.
Yeah, buddy.